After I transmigrated, I awakened a passive skill called a 1,000-grain promise. As long as someone makes a promise to me, they are compelled to keep their word. The only way to dispel the passive is to present me with 1,000 taels of gold. Later, my biological parents came to reclaim me. They protected the fake heiress and told me that all of this was fate playing tricks, and if possible, they were willing to take on all my pain and suffering for me. Me, is there such good fortune? Well then I'll just sit back and wait to be paid. In the end I became the richest person in the country by spreading good morals. When the wealthy parents came calling, I was tutoring the children at the orphanage. Director Clara knocked on the old yellow-painted wooden door and called into the room, "Stella, can you come out for a moment?" The kids below suddenly brightened, little hands fidgeting, unable to resist scratching and squirming. Of course, compared with studying, the little ones preferred to play. I had them read while I went to the director. "Mama Director, is something the matter?" I asked, though I already knew. A few days after being transported to this world, I discovered someone was investigating me. I followed the trail, and I'd already dug up a few things. Director Clara smiled, "This is a good matter, I'll take you to meet two people first." We arrived at the director's office, where a middle-aged couple was waiting inside. They stood side by side, the woman, with the air of a noble lady, kept pressing a handkerchief to her nose, her brow tightly furrowed, clearly in a foul mood. The tall, mature man, however, showed no change of expression, merely rubbing the watch on his left wrist with his right hand. The moment we entered, he was looking down at the time. The teacups on the table were full to the brim, untouched. The worn-out sofa made the couple prefer to stand and wait. At a glance I could tell what kind of people they were. As I passed my judgment, the couple's eyes scanned me from head to toe. At that moment the director, Clara, said, "Mr. Victor, Mrs. Lillian, this is the child you've been looking for." Director Clara grabbed my shoulders with both hands and pushed me toward the couple. "Child, call them Mom and Dad quickly, they're your biological parents." The socialite, Lillian, instinctively covered her nose and stepped back, while Victor, quick as lightning, looped an arm around her waist. The next moment Victor's eyes brimmed with tears. Choking, he said, "Child, I'm your father. Your mother and I have finally found you." Lillian followed Victor's lead, equally moved, and said, "Good daughter, you've suffered, it's Mom and Dad who have wronged you." I hadn't spoken when Director Clara wiped her eyes first. "Mr. Victor, Mrs. Lillian, rest assured, Stella is the best child in our home. She's been thinking of you all these years. When she was little, many people wanted to adopt her but she refused to leave, she was waiting for you." Victor and Lillian smiled with relief. Lillian tugged at the wrist exposed beyond my torn sleeve through her handkerchief. "Child, come home with your mother. Your father and I have missed you so much." I smiled faintly and, in the face of Victor and Lillian's confident, scheming expressions, I refused firmly. "No need. I'll be an adult soon, I don't need guardians anymore." The smiles on Victor and Lillian's faces froze, their eyes turned on me, threaded with reproach. Director Clara hurriedly pushed me. "Mr. Victor, Mrs. Lillian, Stella is sulking, what she looked forward to most was going home with you." She gave me a look, I knew she meant well. After all, no matter how good my grades were, the orphanage couldn't afford my college tuition. But I remained unmoved. That was before. I'm past the age of craving affection. Victor and Lillian exchanged a glance, and Lillian began to sob. "Child, are you blaming us? You were switched at birth, we didn't know back then." I said, "Of course. Losing me, whether on purpose or by accident, was your fault." Lillian choked, unable to cry any more. In the end it was Victor who spoke, "You're not wrong. All of this is our failure as parents. Since learning the truth, your mother has been washing her face with tears every day. Seeing you suffer here breaks my heart and fills me with guilt. Child, can you give us a chance to make it up to you?" They spoke with earnestness. My heart remained unmoved, though doubt began to show on my face. I said, "I don't believe you, unless you swear you'll take on all my suffering for me." Victor and Lillian perhaps thought I was testing their sincerity. Maybe they sneered at my naivety in private. These days promises are like fleas, let them go and they're gone. Who would take them seriously? They nodded firmly. Child, please believe us, we never want these awful things to happen to you. If we could, we would bear all the pain for you. I smiled slightly. Do you swear? We swear. Ding. As the promise was made, a voice sounded in my mind, passive skill activated. Bound targets, Victor, Lillian. From then on Victor and Lillian had to uphold their vows. Only then was I satisfied and agreed to go home with them. On the flight back, Victor and Lillian introduced me to the family members. Grandpa Yu had passed away, the household consisted of Grandma and the eldest brother. They hadn't gone out today, and everyone was looking forward to my return. After some hesitation, they still didn't mention the other girl in the family. After all, the personality I'd shown wasn't that of someone weak. They feared complications and decided to bring me home first and deal with it later. When we arrived at the Yu residence, the driver opened the door for Lillian, bent down and extended his arm, waiting for her to disembark with graceful posture. I, however, opened the door and walked straight to Victor's side, showing no shyness. Lillian approached slowly, criticizing me, "In a couple of days I'll find you an etiquette tutor. The Yu family isn't some shady place you can compare to, here you mustn't be so rough." I crossed my arms. That's your fault too. Who told you to lose me? Useless thing, you can't even take care of your own child. You, how dare you speak to me like that? Where is your upbringing? Lillian pointed at me, her face flushed with anger. Huh? Talk to me about upbringing when I'm an orphan? You are truly hypocritical. You weren't like this back at the orphanage. I didn't indulge her at all and made a move to leave. With people like you, I don't care about coming to your family. Enough, say less. Victor scolded Lillian, then grabbed me. Child, don't blame your mother, her mind isn't right, otherwise she wouldn't have let you be switched at birth. Come home with Daddy. Daddy's prepared a room for you, take a look and see if you like it. Victor relented to me again. Lillian stared in fury, but truly shut her mouth. I knew they had designs on me. We entered the Yu family's home. The living room scene was plain as day. An elderly woman with graying hair sat in the place of honor. A young man in a suit and a finely made-up girl rose from either side of the sofa to greet us. Victor introduced himself first. Stella, this is your eldest brother, Brandon. Brandon, holding his bowl, gave me a nod, considered enough of a greeting. When he came to the other girl, Victor hesitated. Lillian picked up the thread, this is your sister. From now on you two should get along well. The girl took my hand, smiling broadly. Little sister, you must have suffered a lot before. Don't worry, I'll take good care of you from now on. She smiled on her face, but her eyes flashed with a sharp, glaring hostility. Sister, my foot, don't call me that so early. I think you're about my age. I pulled my hand back and asked Victor and Lillian, did you give birth to her and then rush right away to have me? In such a hurry? Victor and Lillian's faces darkened. At that moment the old woman who had been sitting at the head of the room finally spoke. She drove her cane into the floor with force, producing a harsh noise. That's enough, don't be so aggressive. Susan was the girl swapped with you, she was only a baby at the time. This matter isn't her fault. The Yu family raised her for 17 years and formed deep bonds. From now on she and you will both be part of this household, you must watch out for and support one another. Respecting the old and caring for the young depends on the person. Huh? I snorted coldly. If it's not her fault, is it supposed to be mine? With our inherently opposed positions, you still expect us to get along? I think you're getting senile. Those words drew the scolding of everyone in the Yu family. Disobedient to elders, great filial impiety. I didn't care and kept speaking insolently. If you can't stand me so much, then should I leave? Everyone fell silent, especially Brandon. He spoke rapidly, you can't go anywhere. Idiot, this is a society governed by law, Are you trying to imprison me? I rolled my eyes at him and turned to leave. Victor stepped in to smooth things over. Stella, stay. Your elder brother didn't mean anything else. You're his biological sister, he can't bear for you to leave, that's why he spoke so sharply. I glanced around, half smiling, half amused. Everyone wants me to stay, doesn't anyone here not welcome me? Brandon grinned broadly. Sister, we're all glad you can come home. The others nodded repeatedly. Granny Yu tapped her cane twice, said nothing, but offered no objection either. All right. I was about to relent, then changed my tone and added, but you have to swear. Swear you'll treat me well, compensate me, and if I suffer any harm, you'll take responsibility for it. The Yu family exchanged glances. If you don't swear, I'm leaving. Brandon bit his lip. I swear, I'll treat you well for the rest of my life. If you suffer any harm, I'm willing to bear it for you. He gripped Susan's shoulder, and Susan made the same vow. Passive skill activated, newly bound targets, Brandon, Susan. No one took those words seriously. If such childish tricks could make me stay peacefully, they were willing to move their lips. But Granny Yu scoffed with disdain, snatching her cane and trudging slowly back to her room. She was very old, and I couldn't be bothered to fuss with her, afraid I might actually wear her out and have her die on me, creating more trouble. Victor and Lillian had already sworn earlier. Now, in front of their children, they couldn't open their mouths. I heard Victor say, "You're tired today too. Dad will take you to your room to rest." My room is mainly sky blue, overall it's passable. I'm not going to live here long anyway, so I'm too lazy to fuss. Dinner time. Victor took Brandon out for engagements and hasn't returned. At the dining table, Granny Yu sat in the head seat, with Lillian and Susan on either side of her. I went downstairs. Granny Yu was holding on to her old lady airs, waiting for me to make the first conciliatory move. I was really hungry, so I plopped down at any available spot and picked up my chopsticks. Lillian cleared her throat lightly and, with a sidelong glance, said, "You grew up in an orphanage and didn't know better before, now your mother is teaching you." In our Yu family, the rule is that at this table the elders usually move the first chopsticks, youngsters shouldn't be too greedy. Yes, only an old woman would have such a greedy mouth. I skimmed the menu and picked the dishes I liked to go with my rice. Of course, I never smacked my lips, and I certainly didn't pick through any particular dish. In my previous life I was just an ordinary researcher, I never expected to die suddenly during an experiment. When I opened my eyes again I had arrived in this world and awakened a passive skill, a promise is worth 1,000 gold. In this life I still planned to work in a lab. I had no intention of fitting into the Yu family. So what rules? What did they have to do with me? Grandma Yu felt her authority had been challenged, and she began pounding the ground with her cane again. Lillian, tomorrow find her a strict etiquette teacher. If she can't learn manners, she doesn't get to eat. Eat, what a glutton, born to be a rice bucket. Lillian agreed, "Don't worry, Mom, we'll definitely find a teacher." I don't expect her to be as graceful and poised as Susan, but at least she mustn't disgrace the Yu family when she's out. Susan chimed in, "Grandma, don't be mad at my sister. Maybe she just never had such nice things before, with more exposure she'll surely learn." "Right, sister?" Susan looked at me with a taunting stare. I buried my head and ate, finishing with a sip of soup while they kept chattering on, ruining my mood. I instinctively gripped the dining table with both hands, looking at the untouched dishes I had alone disturbed, feeling ashamed of the waste. So I stood up and, under their bewildered gazes, collected their tableware one by one. With a clatter, I smashed the porcelain pieces at their feet. Ah! Susan and Lillian screamed in fright, and Granny Yu trembled as well. Shards flew, cutting tiny wounds around their ankles. I crossed my arms, utterly defiant. "I don't need you to tell me how to do things, got it?" I went upstairs, paying no mind to their discomfiture. Victor had prepared for me the latest electronic devices and a bank card. I opened the computer, my fingers flying, and soon hacked into Victor and Brandon's phones. Before long, a test report appeared on the screen. It turned out Brandon's kidneys weren't in good shape. They had brought me back for my kidneys. Suddenly, I found myself oddly anticipating what would happen next. Putting everything else aside, the passive of one promise is 1,000 gold alone was enough to make them reap what they'd sown. Knock knock knock. Someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, Susan stood there holding a cup of milk. As soon as she saw me open the door, she hurled the milk in my face. I was quick-eyed and quick-handed, and I grabbed her wrist. The cup tipped, and white milk poured over her head. Only after it finished did I react. TSK, what a waste. Susan went berserk. Stella, how dare you? She couldn't help screaming loudly. Lillian was called over by her. Susan, what's going on? How did it come to this? Lillian was heartbroken and hurriedly told the maid to fetch a towel. Susan cried with tears streaking down her face. Mom, I only wanted to bring my sister a cup of milk. I didn't expect her. She actually, sob. Stella, you are so wicked. How could you hurt your sister like this? Lillian glared at me. I smiled. Look closely, this is my room. She came here to pick a fight, and I'm not going to indulge her. Lillian pointed at me. You unfilial girl, I never should have given birth to you. I rolled my eyes. I'd rather not have been born by you. You could even mistake your own child. You're a useless piece of trash. Sister, you can't say that about Mom just because you hate me. It was already hard for Mom to give birth to you. Who knows if the nurses mixed up the babies? Susan tried to comfort Lillian in reverse. Mom, this isn't your fault. If my sister can't accept me, I can leave, boo-hoo. Susan cried again, and Lillian felt even more pity for this sensible child. She looked at me with increasing dislike. If Lillian's eldest son didn't still need my kidney, she would never have taken a daughter like me back into the house. Lillian was furious from calling me useless trash over and over, but I'm like a stubborn piece of cured meat. She really had no way to deal with me. Susan, your mom will never let you go. My daughter should be a good girl like you. Come on, let Mom dry your hair, don't catch cold. Lillian and Susan finally left me. Susan even glanced back with a triumphant smile. I just felt that dealing with idiots really wastes my sleep time. The next day when I went downstairs, Victor and Brandon were both there. Neither of them mentioned what happened last night. Victor said, your transfer paperwork is done. You're at the same school as Susan. Do you want to go to school with her? No, arrange a different car for me. I declined. Victor agreed. The new school was a prestigious institution known far and wide. I collected my books and uniforms, and the homeroom teacher led me to my new class. Unexpectedly, I found myself in the same class as Susan. The only seat left in the room was next to the trash can. I walked straight up to the podium and introduced myself. Hello everyone, I'm Stella, the biological daughter of the Yu family who was switched at birth 17 years ago. What a coincidence, Susan, who was switched with me, is in this class too. A stir ran through the room, everyone's eyes darted back and forth between Susan and me. Susan's face flushed red, she hadn't expected me to reveal this fact the moment we met. Now everyone knew she was the fake daughter who had usurped her place, and those looks were unbearable for the usually proud Susan. Susan lay face down on the desk and cried. I looked at the homeroom teacher. I don't want to sit in the very last row. Teacher, could you give me a seat that's more convenient for studying? The homeroom teacher had also only just noticed the extra desk beside the trash can. This was a noble academy, with large classrooms and a designated spot for a trash can. It was obvious someone had been meddling. The homeroom teacher had a headache, but the Yu family had power and influence here. He couldn't afford to offend them, so he immediately assigned me a seat near the middle. I was satisfied. Susan cried bitterly. There were quite a few people who usually got along with her. Those people looked at me with ill will. But like I said, Susan had once carried the title of Miss Yu, and most people around her were there to flatter her. Now the true issue was me. Susan was someone whose parents were unknown. They couldn't discern the U family's stance, and no one in the school came to pick a fight with me. Except for the group led by Vanessa. I loved studying, especially since the knowledge in this world differed in some ways from that of my original world. While I was buried in my studies, a pair of hands suddenly clapped down on my desk. The nails were manicured, glittering so brightly they nearly blinded me. "Hey, were you the one bullying Susan?" I looked up. The girl in front of me had her hair styled in big waves, her makeup immaculate, and she was wearing a strapless dress. Pretty, yes, but she didn't look like a high schooler. A few other girls in the same style followed behind her. I didn't say anything. The girl in front of me suddenly shoved me hard, and I slammed into the table behind me. "Ah!" Before I could react, Susan nearby suddenly cried out. The classmates all looked toward her. The girl in front of me hurried over even faster, anxiously asking, "Susan, what's wrong with you?" "Vanessa, my back hurts so much." Susan's eyes were full of tears. It was clear the pain had hit her hard all at once. Vanessa's family background is a bit inferior to the U's. She genuinely considered Susan a friend, and, backed by the Lin family, had always been arrogant and overbearing. She had bullied many students at this school into quitting. Now she set her sights on me. I don't care and keep studying. At the same time, Victor, Lillian, and Brandon all felt a sudden, sharp pain in their backs. They grimaced in pain but couldn't find the cause. Recess. I was trapped in the bathroom. Before long, Vanessa came in with her followers and even locked the bathroom from the outside. Vanessa and her crew closed in on me. "Stella, you're so arrogant, huh? Do you know who runs the school?" One of Vanessa's followers turned on the tap connected to a hose and handed the hose to Vanessa. The tap was opened all the way, water rushed and gushed. They smiled with malicious intent. "Vanessa, she even has breasts, huh? Who knows how many people slept with her for them to get this big? Ha ha ha, make sure to take good pictures later, don't want any fingerprints left, okay?" Vanessa suddenly aimed the hose at me, pinching the nozzle, soaking me from head to toe. I didn't dodge. The fast-flowing water struck my body, my clothes soaked through, yet I felt neither pain nor cold. Vanessa kept spraying me for almost 10 minutes, my face didn't change, I even smiled. I could already imagine how unbearable this time must have been for the members of the U family. My smile completely enraged Vanessa. She threw down the hose. "Bitch, you still dare to smile," she cried, stepping forward to hit me. I grabbed her wrist, returned the slap with the back of my hand. Then I quickly seized her hair, pinned her into the sink, and turned on the tap. "You like playing with water so much, what's the fun playing alone? Let's play together." I put on a full-on villainous smile and pinned Vanessa down. Vanessa's head clogged the drain, the water couldn't go away and soon submerged her face. "Stella, let Vanessa go." Vanessa's followers lunged forward. I picked up the hose from the ground, one hand keeping Vanessa down, the other gripping the hose and turning the spray right at them. "Come on, play in the water, it's so much fun." I laughed out loud, feeling utterly satisfied. These scumbags who bullied others at school never felt pain unless the blade cut them. Estimating the time was right, I tossed aside the hose, lifted my precious hand and released Vanessa's hair. "Ah, bitch, I'll kill you." Vanessa, dizzy and disoriented, lunged at me. At the same time, the bathroom door was burst open. My tall, imposing driver bounded forward, intercepted Vanessa, and shrugged off his coat to drape it over me. "Miss, go home first. I will tell Mr. Victor about this." I went back to my place to shower and change. When I came downstairs, only the housekeeper Mary was in the kitchen preparing food. I asked her, "Mary, aren't they home?" "Second miss, Madam isn't feeling well today." "Before you returned, the matriarch accompanied her to the hospital." "Oh." I twitched the corner of my mouth. After lunch, members of the U family arrived back in a group. Brandon was still sneezing when he came in. Lillian and Susan looked equally listless. I pretended not to notice and went straight to tattle to Victor. Dad, Vanessa Lynn bullied me at school. She cornered me in the bathroom, not only splashed water on me but tried to hit me and took videos and photos of me. My heart and body have both been gravely harmed. You must restore my dignity. Hearing me say that, Brandon grew anxious. Are you all right physically? I mean, the Lynn family clearly doesn't respect us yous. How dare they bully my sister like this? This was my first time being bullied at school. I'm still not myself, I said, pretending not to notice his oddness and continuing. I am not someone to be trampled on. If the Lynn family doesn't pay a steep enough price, I will never let this go. Victor nodded. I will take care of this. Susan hesitated, about to speak, but Victor had already made up his mind on the matter. If she opened her mouth she might only stir up trouble, so she stayed silent. Brandon had been watching me the whole time, still uneasy. Sister Stella, Big Brother will take you to get checked out. He really did care about my health. I gave a faint smile. No, I'm not going. I want to take a nap. The next day I went to school. Vanessa's seat was empty. Her cronies all avoided my gaze when they saw me. After school, just as I stepped out the school gate, Vanessa stopped me again. Today she wore no makeup, her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her clothes, and many of the diamonds on her manicure had fallen off. Something you want? I raised an eyebrow. Vanessa's eyes burned with resentment, as if she'd made a huge decision. She lowered her proud head heavily. I'm sorry. Yesterday was my fault. I shouldn't have bullied you. Reluctant. In her eyes, although I am now the young Master Yu's daughter, for the previous 17 years I'd been stuck in that lowly place called the orphanage. Someone like her, born with a silver spoon, naturally still saw me as inferior, a person she could torment at will. Now she was being blamed because of me and forced to apologize. How could Vanessa possibly do it willingly? But I didn't need her apology either. The driver came to pick me up, I ignored her and walked off. Behind me, Vanessa kicked the trash bin by the roadside over with a violent shove. In the days that followed, Vanessa's followers transferred schools one after another. But the Yu family's assault on the Lynns did not end. The Yus had long wanted to swallow the Lynns whole. My situation merely gave Victor a perfectly legitimate pretext. In less than 2 months, Lynn Corporation declared bankruptcy. On the day Lynn Corporation went under, Susan asked me out shopping. Little sister, you've been home so long without going out, study needs to be balanced with rest. I watched her perform quietly. The Yu family had been through a lot lately. I kept bumping into things from time to time, and the members of the Yu family would end up with a few more bruises on their bodies. They didn't suspect me, they just thought there might be something wrong with their health. Especially Brandon, the first thing he thought was that his kidneys were getting worse and he needed a transplant. So Brandon instructed Mary to give me tonic soups every day. I drank the restorative broths daily and stayed up late studying at night. As for any after effects from the late nights, there were none at all. Compared to my radiant energy, Susan looked considerably haggard. When she suddenly asked me out today, it was obvious she had no good intentions. I guessed what Susan had in mind and decided to play along with her. I just want to study, studying makes me happy, I said. Susan's smile froze for a moment and then grew even sweeter. She took my hand affectionately. It's too boring for your sister to go alone. Come with me, and I'll pay for everything you spend today. I relented unwillingly. Fine, if you're going to act foolish, I won't refuse. Susan dragged me off to the city's largest mall without waiting. Suddenly, chaos erupted inside the mall, people crowded and ran toward the exits. Susan and I were separated in the crush. Someone clamped a hand over my mouth from behind and dragged me away. A towel was covering my face. I recognized the smell of ether on it. A few seconds later I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I was hogtied and thrown into an abandoned warehouse. Vanessa and her cronies were all there. I wriggled my hands and feet, the ropes were tight. What do you think you're doing? I'm warning you, If anything happens to me, my father won't let you off. You bullied me before and my dad ruined the Lin family's business. Now you still dare to kidnap me? You must not want to live. I tilted my head back, wearing a look of haughty confidence, as if I trusted Victor completely and believed he would have my back. Except for Vanessa, the others were hesitant. But the ones ruined were the Lins. Vanessa's mind was already full of rage. She kicked me down, eyes wild. Call your father now. Tell him to bring 200 million in cash to ransom you. If he can't come up with the money, you can wait to be torn to pieces by me. Vanessa grabbed my phone, unlocked it with my fingerprint, and scrolled through the contacts. At a glance her expression cleared. She pressed the phone against my face with a strange look. Which one is Mr. Victor's number? Number 1. Vanessa dialed number 1. At the same time, Victor, who had suddenly fallen unconscious, was painfully jerking awake. His head was spinning, his hands and feet ached, his shoulders ached, his whole body ached. In pain he kept shouting, "Doctor, get me a doctor." His assistant hurriedly said, "Mr. Victor, you suddenly passed out during the meeting today and you've already been taken to the hospital. The doctor will be here any moment." It was at that moment Victor's phone rang. He gasped sharply in pain. The assistant answered and put the phone on speaker. "Stella is in my hands. If you want her life back, bring 200 million as ransom." Immediately a video was sent. In it I was tied up with my arms and legs bound, and a sharp knife pressed against my throat. The assistant was stunned. Victor, ignoring his own pain, immediately ordered people to investigate. When the Yu family gathered again in the hospital, they discovered that they had all fallen unconscious at the same time today, and their symptoms were exactly the same. The family watched the video of me being kidnapped. Their limbs hurt even more, and their whole bodies were rigid, as if they'd been bound for a long time. They exchanged worried looks, and Susan suddenly blurted out, "We can't really be taking on her pain for her, can we?" They suddenly remembered the vow they had made earlier. Brandon swallowed and said, "No, it can't be something so bizarre, can it?" "How do you explain that? She was the one staying up late before, we were the ones who were exhausted, the ones without energy, and there were unexplained bruises appearing on us." Susan shuddered at the thought that Stella had lost consciousness at the same time I had been drugged. She knew that with Vanessa's extreme personality, she would eventually silence witnesses. If Stella really had been silenced, would she also be killed? "We have to save her," Brandon and Susan said in unison. Victor and Lillian felt the same way. They still needed to verify whether the symptoms they were experiencing were caused by me. Victor took some time to come up with 200 million in liquid cash. During that period they kept getting crushed. Everyone felt like they'd been beaten, every part of them hurt. Every now and then someone would give a pained scream. Grandma Yu watched from the side, both heartbroken and terrified. She came close, so close, to swearing at me too. Could she not be afraid? Finally scraping the money together, Victor dialed my number and shouted into the phone, "If you dare lay a hand on my daughter again, I'll make sure your whole family has no grave to bury you in." Vanessa and the others were mainly after money. Victor clearly cared a great deal about me, and they didn't want to take any more risks. After that, Victor and the others truly no longer felt like they were going to be beaten. What was there left to not understand? Precisely because they understood, they became even more afraid. Afraid I would be killed to silence me. I waited for Victor to ransom me. And I had time to taunt Vanessa. "I remember the first time I saw you, you were a delicate little beauty. How long has it been? Not only are you haggard, you've grown ugly." Vanessa was dressed sloppily, her face waxen, her hands without any nail polish. It was obvious she had been having a rough time lately. Hearing me mock her, she glared and was about to come strike me. Vanessa's follower hurriedly stopped her. "Vanessa, think about 200 million. We can't stir up any more trouble." Vanessa felt even more jealous for a moment. Her parents could so easily give her up because of the Yu family's suppression, but Stella's parents cared so much about Stella. But even in jealousy, Vanessa retained her reason. She was planning to run off with 200 million, and as for her parents, they had already abandoned her, she couldn't care less if they died. I felt a bit sorry. With injuries like that, I wondered if Brandon had been taken to the ICU. An hour later, Victor returned with the money. While they were negotiating, a group of police officers suddenly burst through the door. Police! Drop your weapons! Vanessa was shocked. You actually called the police? Her followers all panicked. Victor was confused too, he hadn't called the police. Families like theirs preferred to handle things privately, calling the police would seriously damage the company's image. I smiled faintly, hiding my achievement and fame. These scum who liked to bully others, is a transfer really enough? Many of the people they harmed had lost their lives, even had their families torn apart. One of my goals in playing this part was to make them face the law's punishment. The second purpose, then. When I was rescued by the police officers, Brandon's condition worsened and he was rushed into the emergency room. I was taken to the hospital too. The examination results showed I was in perfect health. I didn't even have a scratch on me. The Yu family looked at me, unscathed, and yet felt the lingering pain coursing through their bodies. Each of them held back words, wanting to cry but with no tears left. Victor probed, Stella, about that vow we made. I twisted my arm and smiled, what do you think? The Yu family's arms hurt terribly from the twist. Let go, let go. Lillian couldn't bear it any longer, spoiled for years, when had she ever endured such hardship? The conjecture came true. Now they didn't dare let me give Brandon a kidney. Good heavens, what kind of monster am I that even a joking vow I make can come true? The Yu family was crestfallen and urgently searching for a kidney match for Brandon. In the chaos, the police came and took Susan away. Vanessa confessed that she was an accomplice in the kidnapping and extortion. But Susan wasn't convicted. She wasn't a fool, although she guessed what Vanessa was planning, she pretended not to know, and never explicitly agreed to help Vanessa kidnap me. She had only accepted Vanessa's invitation to go shopping. She didn't know Vanessa would do something illegal. But how could the rest of the Yu family not see through Susan's intentions? The Yu family's attitude toward her turned completely cold. Their whole effort to bring me back in the first place was fundamentally aimed at getting a kidney for Brandon. Of course they wouldn't allow anything to happen to me. Susan was their daughter, and not even a biological one, she could never naturally be compared to Brandon. But Susan didn't know that. In order to win back the Yu family, she pleaded, Mom, Dad, Grandma, I can do the tissue typing. What if I happen to be a match for my big brother? The Yu family fell silent. When Brandon's failing kidney was discovered, they had already tested Susan. Not only was she incompatible, they also found out she wasn't Victor and Lillian's biological child. Susan understood. Precisely because she understood, she truly fell apart. Her hostility toward me stemmed partly from her claim to the Yu heiress status, and partly because she really cared about the Yu family. She was afraid I would steal the affection of the Yu family parents, Brandon's favor. And Grandma Yu. Grandpa Yu favored sons over daughters and had always doted on Brandon. Grandma Yu, on the other hand, loved her more. At least that's what Grandma Yu always told her. She really believed it. Now Susan is collapsing, Susan is going mad, Susan treats them with sarcasm every day. Serves you right, right? So proud of your son, your only son, and you don't even know if he'll be able to have children. If you treated Stella a little better from the start, she might have borne you a grandson to care for you. Now that she knows you only regarded her as a tool to get a kidney for Brandon, she probably hates you to death. The Yu family was furious but couldn't touch me. Could they still do anything to Susan, their adopted daughter they depended on? So Susan and the Yus began a battle of wits and courage. Those closest to you know your pain best. Susan learned on her own that the Yu family cared most about face, and she could spar with them blow for blow. While I studied every day, I also got free front-row entertainment. Life was wonderfully comfortable. Soon the college entrance exam arrived. During the exam period, Brandon finally found a compatible kidney donor and went into surgery immediately. After the exam, I left the U household at once. I didn't tell them how to deactivate the passive ability, it was just too useful. Ever since that passive kicked in, staying up late no longer makes my hair fall out. I'm full of energy every day, and I have the drive to do anything. I successfully got into Capital University. When school started, I heard that Brandon had a severe post-operative rejection reaction, was almost constantly in the hospital, and was practically useless. Susan's grades were average, but perhaps out of anxiety, after I was brought back she kept asking for money and saving. Now that she'd fallen out with the Yu family, she simply moved to a distant city and lived off her savings in a life that was neither high nor low. When the Yu family saw this, the son ruined, the adopted daughter gone, they turned to try to grasp me, their biological daughter. Too bad, I was already in the lab and didn't see them easily. The technology in my original world was somewhat more advanced than it is here, and in my past life I had quite a bit of experience. Standing on the shoulders of giants, I quickly came to the attention of those above. After observation, the state discovered my peculiarities, and coupled with the considerable contributions I made to scientific research, the Yu family could no longer bother me. People assigned by the state helped fend off many troubles. Moreover, my passive skill proved immensely useful. Whenever states were about to sign some important treaty or enter into a partnership with a particular company, they would call on me. My passive skill kept pinging on and on. I was making money even while lying down. Even the negative effects had people to bear them. My enthusiasm for conducting experiments grew stronger by the day. Ah, what a sweet dilemma. But it sure felt great.